Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching World Report on News X World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. An Israeli media channel has reported that the United States of America is pressuring Israel to permit the safe passage of some 200 Hamas operatives currently hiding in tunnels beneath the IDF-controlled areas of southern Gaza. U.S. President Donald Trump has endorsed Andrew Cuomo in the New York City mayor's race against Zohran Mamdani. He has also stated that if Mamdani wins, he will contribute very little to the federal funds. Peru breaks off of diplomatic ties with Mexico. This comes as Mexico decides to grant asylum to former Prime Minister of Peru, Betsy Chavez, who is under investigation for rebellion. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and South Korean Defense Minister have held annual security talks in Seoul. Hegseth has said that the core of alliance of South Korea is protecting against North Korea. China has dismissed Taiwan's safety concerns over the 2026 APEC Leaders Summit in Shenzhen, insisting it will ensure all participants' security under APEC rules and One China principle. Kim Yong-nam, North Korea's former ceremonial head of state and longtime diplomat who served under 3 generations of the Kim family, has died at the age of 97, according to local state media reports. Reports also suggest that the leader Kim Jong-un paid his respects in person, honoring the veteran statesman. Typhoon Kalmaegi has hit central Philippines. At least 2 people have been killed so far as per reports. Meanwhile, torrential rain, strong winds and storm surges have forced tens of thousands to evacuate from their homes. Now we start with U.S. House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries has accused U.S. President Donald Trump and congressional Republicans of intentionally blocking the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. As a prolonged government shutdown stretches into its 34th day, Republicans and Democrats are in a disagreement in Congress over an extension of federal funding, but Democrats have backed demanding that any federal funding plan also include an extension of enhanced Obamacare health insurance subsidies, which are set to expire. But last week, 2 federal courts ruled that the Trump administration will send only partial payments to 42 million Americans who rely on food stamps to buy groceries. Let's listen into what the Democrat minority leader has said.
This is day 34 of the Trump Republican shutdown, and our position as Democrats remain the same. We will sit down with any Republican who is prepared in good faith to find a bipartisan path forward to reopening the government, to entering into a spending agreement that actually makes life better for the American people, not worse, and that decisively addresses the Republican health care crisis. At the same period of time, it's extraordinary that Donald Trump, his administration, and corrupt Republicans on Capitol Hill are voluntarily and intentionally withholding SNAP benefits from 42 million Americans who are at risk of going hungry. This includes 16 million children. This is an intentional decision.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Matthew Badham. He's an American journalist, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Matthew, for joining us again. Good to see you. Matthew, what more can you tell us about this situation that's unfolding with the ongoing government shutdown? And how is this reshaping public perception of both major parties' handling of social welfare?
I don't know how it is reshaping public perception of the parties. I do know how what has happened recently. 2 judges ordered the Trump administration to fund the SNAP program, even though the Trump administration said that it has exhausted funding for it because it doesn't have access to newly appropriated funds because of the government shutdown, because there's no funding legislation in place. Now they're going to start, the government announced that it is going to, it has about half of the money that it needs to fund this, to fund the current food stamp or SNAP benefits, and it's going to start making payments of about half of what would normally go out in the next few days. So they have made some progress in that respect. There's still a standoff in Congress over funding the government, and the standoff is, as Democratic Leader Jeffries has and other Democrats have admitted, is because Democrats want a subsidy to continue for Obamacare premiums, and Republicans counter that Democrats want the American people to continue funding health care for illegal aliens. Now, some people will say, illegal aliens don't qualify for, for Medicare or Medicaid, for federal health care assistance. But the thing is, many state governments use federal funds, health care funds, to fund their health care programs, and so the money trickles down to the state level, and it does get used to provide health care benefits for illegal aliens. So, both sides are really at each other's throats right now, and it doesn't seem like a resolution is going to happen anytime in the near future. Some Democrats have said that they will vote to reopen the government after November the 4th, which is today, I guess, when there are elections, off-year elections in some states. There are hotly contested elections for governor in Virginia and in New Jersey, and there's the big race for mayor of New York City that are going to be voted on, I guess, today. And that Democrats, once those elections were passed, there was some discussion that they would vote to reopen the government and fund the federal government after that happened. We'll have to see what happens. But right now, the two sides are not. They don't seem to be making a lot of progress. And it's really not clear what happened. Right now, there's a lot of finger pointing. One side's pointing at the other, and the other side's pointing back.
Yes.
And they are not in agreement on what's going to happen with the funding at the moment. And
Yes.
We'll have to see if they can cut a deal in Congress anytime soon.
Yes. Thank you very much, Matthew Adam, for sharing that insight. We will be eyeing that in NewsX World. Now, please stay with us as we stay in the region. Now, moving on, Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has praised UN Human Rights Commissioner Volker Turk for his recent criticism of U.S. airstrikes in South America. Maduro has called Turk's comments a step forward for international law and regional stability. Turk had earlier condemned U.S. strikes on alleged drug traffickers as unacceptable and a violation of human rights law. Maduro has stated that Turk's statement was a welcome change and that the world needs a human rights chief who defends international norms and opposes crimes threatening the Caribbean. Let's in fact listen into what Maduro has said.
Esta semana pasada hubo una declaración de Volker, alto comisionado de derechos humanos, al cual hemos criticado mucho nosotros de Venezuela. Ha hecho una declaración de verdad feliz de Volker. Hay que reconocer en justicia que ha puesto los puntos sobre las IES y nos parece un avance importante. Ese es el Volker Ese es el alto comisionado de derechos humanos que necesitan los pueblos del mundo. Con ese Volker vale la pena hablar y entenderse. Un hombre que defienda el derecho internacional, los derechos humanos y esté en contra de crímenes como estos, que amenazan la vida de los pueblos del Caribe, pero amenazan lo más grave, la paz, la estabilidad de nuestro.
Meanwhile, Venezuela's Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello has said that the government of Trinidad and Tobago has taken a stance against Venezuela. This comes as earlier this week, Venezuela denounced a military provocation after Trinidad and Tobago hosted the warship USS Gravely for joint exercising with the United States. Let's listen into what the Venezuelan Interior Minister has said.
El gobierno de Trinidad, tristemente para el pueblo de Trinidad y Tobago, han asumido una posición de ser un frente contra nuestro país. Frente. Históricamente, Trinidad y Tobago tiene con Venezuela buenas relaciones, extraordinarias relaciones. Nosotros hemos sido agredidos por Trinidad y Tobago de mano y de voz de la señora que es primera ministra de Trinidad y Tobago, que no le ha importado el tiempo de buenas relaciones. Todo eso tiene que ver con quién es chantajeable y quién no es.
Now we welcome back Matthew Adam. He's an American journalist, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Matthew, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, could this diplomatic tension signal a broader shift in alliances and influence across of South America?
The tensions between, I'm not sure about a shift in alliances, but tensions are escalating between the United States and Venezuela right now over the Trump administration's policy of attacking alleged drug running boats of Venezuelan narco traffickers and killing the inhabitants or killing the passengers on those boats. Venezuela claims that they're not drug running boats, that they're fishermen, or at one time they said that, which doesn't seem like a very credible claim. The pictures I've seen, they look like speedboats, and it's not the sort of thing that you would catch fish on. Nonetheless, people are concerned that the United States is acting unilaterally and attacking and killing these people without having authorization for Congress or without a state of war, being declared between the two countries. So it's mostly that President Trump doesn't have legal authorization from Congress to do this, that's upsetting people. And this has made Venezuela move even closer to Russia, which it's been asking for, it's been requesting, weapons from, greater military assistance. And, and President Trump as well has been putting pressure on Venezuela. He's been doing some saber rattling, saying that he may take action against Venezuela directly. I don't know if that's going to happen or if that's just, a threat to get the Maduro regime to play ball and cooperate with the United States with respect to these drug running boats. But things are definitely heating up in the northern part of South America. You also, Colombia doesn't have very good relations with the United States at the moment either, and that it certainly didn't help when a few weeks ago President Petro of Colombia came to the United States and urged American troops to mutiny. He said that they should not follow the orders of President Trump, and I think that his visa was revoked, or he was not sure if he was declared persona non grata, but it was made clear that he wasn't welcome in the United States if he's going to be urging U.S. troops to mutiny against their commander-in-chief. So, tensions are heating up in that part of the world, and if anything, it is pushing Venezuela closer, more into the arms of Russia, which is, we're not at war with Russia right now, but it's definitely not a friendly country. It's definitely hostile.
Yes.
And America doesn't like Venezuela getting closer to Russia. So, tensions, I think, are only going to continue or probably get worse, at least in the short term.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Matthew Adam for joining us and sharing that timely insight from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much. Now we stay in the States. New York City's mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani has urged New Yorkers to stand up to bullies, specifically referencing to Republican U.S. President Donald Trump's threat to restrict federal funds for the city if Mamdani wins the election. Mamdani has criticized Trump's attempt to influence the mayoral election, stating that the president's preferred candidate, Andrew Cuomo, shares his same donors, same small vision, and same sense of impunity. Mamdani has argued that Trump's endorsement of Cuomo reflects his desire for a mayor who will serve his administration's interests rather than the best interests of New York City. Meanwhile, Mamdani and some students of New York University have responded to this. Let's listen in.
I will address that threat for what it is. It is a threat. It is not the law. And too often we treat everything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth as if it is already legal just by virtue of who is saying it. And it is time to finally stand up to the bullies that make these threats, not to become the bullies ourselves. And we've seen time and time again that the best way to respond to Donald Trump and to defeat these kinds of threats is to actually stand up and fight back. You've seen leaders across this country who have shown their unwillingness to compromise on their own morals and their own values as the way in which they fight back. And too often what we found in New York City is instead a willingness to capitulate and coordinate. And all of this with the most collaborative mayor you could find for Donald Trump in New York City.
For me, Zoran was the most clear about his intended goals and the ways he was going to reach them. For instance, like matching the corporate tax rate to that of Jersey's 11.5% and explaining the mechanisms by which he was going to do that. I think a lot of the other candidates, especially Cuomo, whenever I did my research, it was far more vague and it was a lot more kind of normative assertions about what's right and what's wrong and what's good and not. But it's like, at the end of the day, what the fuck are you going to say? What are you going to do?
I think in general, people, especially the youth, see this election not just as who's going to lead New York, but who's going to lead the country in a sense. Having someone create such a big platform from a grassroots standpoint against someone like Cuomo, who's gotten billions of dollars from investors and even recently got endorsed by Trump, I believe. It's kind of a test to see, like, can we still do this as a democracy, or are we going to fall the way that we've been following ever since, I guess, 2016?
Taking from this election is it almost feels like it's kind of like amplifying the divide that we feel. Like it feels like the issues almost seems, like it feels like the solution almost feels so clear that there should be bipartisan agreement. Like I think even during the mayoral debate, seeing two of the candidates who might have been arguably or objectively better than the third, like I think that is something that really comes through. And I think that it's really speaking to the divisive culture of the fact that like the two parties that we have right now are really kind of breaking apart our country.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Irina Zuckerman. She's a senior journalist. She's joining us from New York. Thank you, Irina, for joining us again. Good to see you. Irina, how is Zohran Mamdani's popularity looking like compared to Cuomo, and how might President Trump's threat to withhold federal funds influence voter sentiment in New York?
Thank you so much. Well, for now, it still looks very much like Mamdani is leading. The polling puts him somewhere between single and double digits, depending on the poll. However, it's not clear just how accurate these polls are, given that early voting has ended and the actual day of elections hasn't even begun. Trump endorsed Cuomo at the very last minute. To be clear, of course, Donald Trump's threats are part of the calculus that many of the voters are making. And of course, this is looking like a very polarized and polarizing election. But in some way, it's also a very strange election where a mayoral candidate is running against the president of the United States and vice versa. It's in some ways, these two are perfect foils for each other, and in some ways, they're also completely putting aside the interests of their actual constituencies in order to make this race about themselves and their career choices. In Mamdani's case, it's very clear that he's planning to run for national office as soon as he finishes his term, if he becomes mayor. So where does it leave the actual New Yorkers? That's a big question, because it's very unclear just how much of Mamdani's promises are about governance and how much they are about simply getting into the office, getting that check on his career belt and gaining that national popularity, which he got very quickly. A lot of it is about his personal ambitions, and a lot of it is certainly about making promises that he may or may not keep, because he is much more similar to Donald Trump than anyone cares to admit. In other words, is he really going to enforce all these alleged social benefits, or is he simply going to use them as a shakedown for big business to boost his own popularity? We're already seeing some billionaires contribute to his campaign. Are they doing so out of genuine belief in socialism, or are they doing that to protect their own interests? All those questions remain on the table as we are watching the election unfold.
And how do you think, how might this conflict affect the balance of power between federal authority and municipal governance, if it could?
Well, I do think that even if Cuomo, by some miracle, ekes out this election, there will be no shortage of disagreement between him and the federal authorities on some key issues, funding being one of them, and that, by the way, is not news. Cities and federal authorities have very often been at odds, depending on their power divisions, and sometimes even with the same branch, it's always a balance. I think I am concerned, though, that for Mamdani it's going to be less about protecting the interest of his constituencies than about showing off Trump. And at times when cooperation and flexibility and wisdom might be in order to get the most out of that relationship, he is going to be confrontational just to spite Trump, just to make himself look like he's keeping his promises, but in reality it will actually undermine any prospects for securing the funding that he needs for New York.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Irina Zuckerman for giving us that timely insight as a senior journalist from New York. Thank you very much. Now we stay in the region. Peru's government has announced that the country is severing diplomatic relations with Mexico over the asylum claim of former Peruvian Prime Minister Betsy Chavez, who is under investigation for a coup attempt in 2022. Peruvian Foreign Minister Hugo de Zila has expressed his surprise and deep regret after learning that Betsy Chavez was being given refuge at the Mexican embassy in Peru. Prosecutors are seeking a 25-year sentence for Chavez's alleged role in Castillo's plan to dissolve the Congress. Peru's decision to sever diplomatic ties with Mexico adds to ongoing tensions between these two governments since Castillo's ousting. Let's listen into what the Peruvian foreign minister has said.
Siguiente. Hoy hemos conocido con sorpresa y con profundo pesar que la ex premier Betsy Chávez presunta coautora del golpe de Estado que pretendió consumar el expresidente Pedro Castillo, está siendo asilada en la residencia de la Embajada de México en el Perú. Frente a este acto inamistoso y teniendo en cuenta las reiteradas ocasiones en que el actual y el anterior presidente de ese país han intervenido en los asuntos internos del Perú, el gobierno peruano ha decidido en la fecha romper relaciones diplomáticas con México.
Now we move on. U.S. President Donald Trump has alleged a genocide against Christian citizens underway in the country of Nigeria and has warned of military attacks in Nigeria in response to this alleged genocide unless the Nigerian government acts on it independently. The U.S. president has also warned of cutting off all assistance to the African country if the government continues to allow the killings of Christians, according to him. Former UN genocide prosecutor Charles Ediogun Phillips has spoken about the viability of the American president's threats, even as Nigeria denies the charges and claims this is an excuse to aid an American invasion of their country. Let's listen in.
It would often be the case that the matter would be referred to the Security Council of the United Nations and resolutions would be passed if it gets to that stage, based on the fact that such atrocities may constitute a threat to global peace and security. So that would initially be the first step. And any interference with the sovereignty of a state would be by consensus, international consensus. Countries have a duty under the Genocide Conventions. The rulings of the International Court of Justice are to the effect that violations of the Genocide Convention are so grave and of common concern to the international community as a whole that you don't, to institute an action, you don't necessarily have to be affected by the alleged atrocities, as we have seen in the case of South Africa and the Gambia and Myanmar and other cases that have been brought before the court. Countries have a duty under the Genocide Conventions. The rulings of the International Court of Justice are to the effect that violations of the Genocide Convention are so grave and of common concern to the international community as a whole that you don't, to institute an action, you don't necessarily have to be affected by the alleged atrocities, as we have seen in the case of South Africa and the Gambia and Myanmar and other cases that have been brought before the court. Genocide involves, it's the only crime known to mankind that involves what we prosecutors know as the dolus specialis. It's a special intent to commit genocide, which is the ability to demonstrate that there was an intention on the part of the perpetrator to destroy, in whole or in part, members of a group identified as such based on religious, political, ethnic grounds. In this case, we're talking about Christians. And you would have to show, to be able to illustrate a genocide or prove a genocide, it will be unheard of to be able to show the occurrence of a genocide without the active involvement of the state.
Now for this discussion, we welcome former Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. He's a former Indian ambassador, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us again. Good to see you. Ambassador, looking at this, what do you think could be America's interest in interfering in Nigerian politics or in their statements, genocide? Could there be anything other than, could there be any relations to the Nigeria's claim that it could be American aiding to American invasion?
That may sound far-fetched, but there are ulterior motives to be assigned to what Mr. Trump has said about Nigeria. Suddenly, just 3 days ago, on November 1, he has taken this initiative accusing Nigerian government of not being able to control Christians genocide, etc., and threatened to escalate the rhetoric all the way to asking Department of War to have plans and so on and so forth. There is the need to see it in a wider perspective. World is awash with oil glut, which is likely to get worse in 2026. Almost all observers agree that oil prices are bound to fall as of now to something like $52 next year on average. This would be a particularly difficult situation for United States, which is the largest producer of crude at the moment and one of the major exporters. Much of the additional crude that the United States has produced over the last 15 years has come from shale technology, which is capital intensive and which would erode its competitiveness if oil prices were to go too low. So you are now witnessing separate but connected actions against a number of oil-producing countries by the United States to make them appear to be unreliable partners for supplying of crude over a longer term. You have Iran, which has seen military action and severest sanctions. You've seen escalation of action against Lukoil and Gazprom. You have also, and Russia in particular. You have action in Venezuela, and now you have something of a threat being waved at Nigeria. Nigeria is particularly important because Nigerian crude exports competes in quality terms with shale oil produced by United States across the Atlantic in Texas. So that I see it as perhaps the only logical motive for the United States president to certainly agitate this particular threat against Africa's largest oil producer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, for sharing that insight. Now that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.